Today we're gabbing with Kate Aurthur from Variety. Kate has really been behind some of the biggest scoops in the Bravo world over the past several years. I mean, the Roni being split into two shows comes to mind. The recent Real Housewives of New Jersey reunion stuff comes to mind. That's just to name a couple, but Kate really is at the front lines of the reporting when it comes to Bravo. So I'm thrilled to have Kate here to do a end of season deep dive on this kind of pivotal season of Real Housewives of New Jersey. So Kate, thanks so much for doing this. I'm glad we could finally find a time. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? I'm so glad to be doing this too. Thank you so much. I have many thoughts. So
As I think a lot of us in this space do. So I guess just let's just jump into it. I mean, but I want to kind of go back to the beginning of this season because I feel like the big promise of this season was okay, this is Melissa and Teresa agreeing to coexist. It's not going to be about their relationship any longer. If we're going to be moving on to different things, they can still both be on this cast for one more season. That was kind of the vibe that we were all kind of told, and that was sort of the log line of this season.
yeah,
What did you make of that? Did that feel plausible to you? Kind of where was your head?
I remember when Teresa delivered the ultimatum at the reunion last year that Melissa was going to be fired, or the edict, I guess,
Yeah.
that Melissa was going to be fired and that she wouldn't do the show with her anymore. And I remember asking Bravo about that, and they were like, no. We decide who does what with whom, and that's not either of their decisions, and we're expecting that both of them will return, which is of course what happened. um as we saw, the bigger rift than between Melissa and Teresa was the rift between Margaret and Teresa. And that so dominated the show, which I don't know whether they just weren't, that wasn't something they were thinking about. But I mean, Melissa and Teresa did coexist,
Yeah.
they did. And I enjoyed this season for the most part, and I was very surprised about it. And way more than last season, actually. And despite many things that I'm sure we'll get into,
Yeah.
um but uh I felt like they did a great job kind of ignoring each other, being in the same space. I mean, as we've seen on other shows, that's very difficult. But it wasn't repetitive in the way
Mm-mm.
that them trying to reconcile has been over the past many years, with Joe and Joe Gorga, and like, now that they gave that up, I was like, this feels workable to me.
Exactly. Exactly. There are plenty of other storylines that again we'll talk about, but like you realize that maybe that was just taking up so much oxygen in the room that like it wasn't giving enough attention to other kind of smaller dynamics that I think were put under the spotlight this season, I would say. But before we get into kind of what happened with Teresa on this season, which is that like she still had kind of major beef with Fudas, with Margaret, other things. I feel like on the flip side with Melissa, she, to me, my read on it, because she wasn't really super involved in the drama this season, and it kind of felt like she almost like either overcorrected or was slightly in her head about disengaging. And because like it was almost like, you know, to the second degree, Teresa was connected to any other drama. So like if
Yeah.
Melissa weighed in on that or got involved in that, then she's kind of, I almost feel like she was in her head. How did you read how Melissa sort of carried herself again, kind of after that idea they're going to coexist?
Yeah. I mean, I really like Melissa
Me
as a
too.
cast member. But if you look closely at her over the years, other than having drama with Teresa, uh, she's never generated that much storyline. And when she has, it's kind of like I don't care about Envy. Their kids seem great. it's not that interesting.
She like has it
Um,
almost two together, basically.
yeah,
Yeah.
and like I don't believe they have marital problems. They seem to love each other so much, and so, but she is an activating agent to
Yes.
Teresa, and that's mostly been her function over the years. But as like a voice of reason character castmate, like I think she's good, and the all worth it for the posing at each other in the
100%. That was
emails,
iconic.
calling her white trash. I mean, if that was all she did all season, then that's fine with me.
You said it. You couldn't have said it better myself. So the beginning of this season, going back to Teresa, was really, I feel like the one of the bigger things was Teresa and Louis versus the Fudas, and I feel like it was
Yes.
interesting because it was shaping up to be this really really big thing, and then the Fudas left that kind of standoff meeting that they had a little too prematurely, and
Yeah.
that sort of took all the air out of what was mounting up to be kind of a bigger deal, and then it just sort of went away. I feel like kind of a third way through the season, um, and I don't know if that speaks to like how the Fudas were kind of handling the whole situation or
Right.
what. But I thought it was interesting that it sort of that just like kind of all went away. It really did.
Yeah. I don't know if they had the stomach for it, right? Like it's like Teresa and now Louis will go down in the muck with the
Yeah.
best of them or the worst of them, whichever. And
Depends on interpretation. Yeah.
it's like the drug dealer, the biggest drug dealer in Bergen County, whatever it was, story. They have little kids. Like, I don't know if they were weighing considerations about what their future might be after these kinds of things. But this does get to one of the frustrations, which is the planting of information
Yeah.
by trolls, by Jen Aiden, it seems, and Teresa also. I saw on the internet this, as fed by Jen Aiden, who was sharing NBC Universal IP with trolls.
Screeners. Yeah.
Um, and um, and you know, uh, but like these things, I wish they'd broken the fourth wall more,
Me
right?
too.
Like at I'm sure it would have come up in and if there had actually been a reunion. Although Andy Cohen didn't seem to really have the stomach for it, with Jennifer Aiden on Watch What Happens Live. Whether that's because she's like a dead woman walking, or I don't know why, but like, there were those
There's some
screenshots.
iciness there. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that happened. And I mean, her Watch What Happens Live appearance is a whole other separate podcast that we could have. Like she was keyed up, like I can't even, that was like an embarrassing performance. But and by the way, Jen Aiden, please don't attack me on the internet. I can't.
Can't handle that. No.
So um so that the fact that that didn't really come out at the Rails watch party is a real flaw in how they wrapped up the series. This cast will never appear together again, and that was like a series finale that we were watching.
Hmm.
And I have no insight into what they're going to do with the cast, but that was the last time that full group of
Right.
people will shoot together. So
Right. Right. We'll get more to the watch party in a little bit, but to
yeah.
me, the biggest kind of calling card of the season that I was most interested in was this idea that Jackie had defected from Margaret and Melissa to the
Right.
Teresa and Jennifer side. We had sort of seen that happen on social media basically in the fall. And then she was on the other BravoCon panel
Yeah,
at
she
BravoCon,
was.
which was explosive, and they didn't hold back in terms of words. Or I mean, Jennifer and Teresa got up from their seats and like were yelling at a fan. Like it was a lot. But Jackie was on that side of things, which was pretty shocking to see if you've been watching the show for the past 6 years. So, you know, how did that play out in terms of like what you were expecting from that? Because to me, the Jackie jumping ship, even though it might
Yeah.
have been for show reasons and to sort of, solidify her place on the show, arguably, it did open up this season. It gave us a lot of, it gave us Dolores versus Jackie. It gave us Jackie versus
Uh,
Margaret. It gave us people questioning whether Jackie and Teresa's friendship was even, legit. So how did that
yeah.
all play out in from your eyes?
Well, I'm curious to know what you think too, but I feel like that's another, we knew the tip of the iceberg part of it.
Yeah.
Like there's the unspoken things about it. The thing about uh Dolores not tagging her or not including her in the photo, whatever it was.
Yeah.
That's like that's because you're not a full-time cast member, right? Like, um, and
I also don't think that Dolores really likes Jackie. I never have always kind of felt that
no,
Dolores never really liked Jackie. Yeah.
right. Well, they had that fight
Yeah.
in Jackie's first season. The way that played out was not one of Dolores's best moments in
I
my
agree. Yeah.
memory. But I mean, that was definitely Jackie is a very smart person, obviously. She did not like being relegated to being a friend. And she was doing a thing, that we've
Hmm.
seen other people do in the past. And she was on the show more this season than last season, I think, in terms of airtime.
Very much
But
so.
uh, I the fact that she blew Melissa off, she wasn't acting in a normal way to me. And I know she is, even today, I think she's doing some cleanup about how that all worked behind the scenes. But I thought that she and Margaret really were friends, and that was sort of sad to me. It does show how transactional these friendships can be.
Hmm.
But I would have loved for her to actually explain in a sane way to Melissa, say, like, instead of like rolling her eyes and acting like she didn't know what she was talking about. And what was it Melissa said? You said in your book that Teresa re-triggered your eating disorder, and Jackie's like, the book hasn't come out yet. That's a spoiler or something, just
But it's
like
like that's deflection. Exactly.
this is
Yeah.
a thing that happened,
Yes.
and I'm
Yes.
sure they had that conversation too. So like that part was strange and
Yeah. It sort of just felt like Jackie
disappointing.
was like, it felt like Jackie was rewriting history in terms of like Melissa and Margaret being shocked over this new friendship, new and sudden friendship.
Yes.
And I think and I do think that a lot of these relationships are transactional, but I do think that Margaret's reaction in particular showed that she was hurt and also thought that their friendship was real. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that like, I agree with you. There was even on Watch What Happens Live when Jackie was on there, she kind of like wouldn't even hear any of her past comments about her drama with Teresa, what Teresa had meant in her life, which is not a positive. She was a very negative force in her
Um,
life. And
ah,
she just overlooked all of that. And that just didn't do her any favors in terms of like people buying what she was selling, basically.
she's kind of ruined her place in the Housewives firmament, as far as I can tell. I was looking at some of the comments on her podcast this morning, actually, and it was just they were all like, "What have you done? Why did you do this? It makes no
Hmm.
sense. You're acting like a crazy person." And then the way Margaret was just able to bust her,
Yeah.
that was quite something during the finale. And then it's just so false and sad when she's trying to convince herself that Teresa is her real friend. Like it just sounds it sounds like a lie,
Yeah,
and it doesn't make any sense. And anyone who's watched the show like would never think it made
makes
sense.
no
And
sense.
it's just disappointing. Jackie is a smart person, and I don't know what the show has driven her to, basically. So it's a good thing for her and her life, I guess, that I assume whatever happens, I don't think she'll be a part of it.
Right, right. It's that's one of the key things that I wish we could have gotten from whatever happened at the end of the season, because the finale was just a watch party of the finale of the previous episode.
Yeah,
there was no there were no clips from earlier in the season shown for them to react to.
right.
So
Yeah.
there was no opportunity for Jackie and Teresa to really have a moment where Jackie reacts to Teresa literally saying verbatim that
I'm
she's
using
using
her.
her for
Yeah.
intel on Marge. And like
Yeah.
maybe Jackie fully believes now that even though their friendship might have started out of convenience and out of show purposes, it's now blossomed into a real friendship. I think that's what
Yeah.
they're at least trying to make everybody believe and convincing themselves of. But I want them to say that in their own words. I want them to talk about that with each other, not just, oh, I understood why you were in contact with Louis' ex because I had done something to you. I was trying to ruin your marriage kind of thing. Like
Yeah.
we didn't get solid explanation there, I don't think.
No. And we might be skipping ahead, but like according to the internet, she was in touch with two of his exes, right? If we're going to believe things that spread around the way Jen Aiden wants them to, then apparently there were two exes who Jackie had at her house. So allegedly. So yeah, it's that was the idea that reunion that finale equaled the reunion and we would all see, like, that's just not true, obviously, and that's fine. They don't want to do one,
Hmm.
it happens. It's happened before. When I think it happens when they know that they're done with the show,
Yeah.
basically. Considering that it was the unlucky season 13 of Real Housewives of New York City, where
Oof.
they
What a
also were
time.
like, "Yeah, we don't need to do a reunion."
Yeah.
So
I also feel like part of it is the topic, the subject matter that would have maybe dominated the conversation at a reunion if one would happen. In that case, it was like really ugly allegations of racism and kind of getting behind into the
yeah,
behind the scenes stuff. And that's what the Roni situation would have been. And I think this situation would have been they would have really wanted to talk about the social media of it all and Jen feeding to people, feeding information to people and get to, that's how they
Alyssa's old nose.
you can't make this shit up, Kate. You really
Yeah,
can't. But it's sort of like that tarnishes the production. That sort of like that hurts
yeah,
the authenticity of the production. And
totally.
it's one thing to like break the fourth wall. It's another to do that. And so I think that my read is that they didn't want to talk about. They didn't want that to dominate a reunion because that's also too in the muck, like you said. It's too the show has gotten way too in the weeds. I think that's a through line
Yeah.
here. It's like if you're just
Mhm.
watching the show, you must be people who are just watching the 42-minute
Yeah.
episodes must be so confused over some of the stuff that they're talking about and alluding
Yeah.
to on Watch What Happens Live on social media. It's too confusing.
Yeah. No, that would be my wife who I watch the show with. And I'm like, pause. Okay. So, I'm constantly like, it was like when I'd read the Game of Thrones books and she hadn't, and that was confusing. But yeah, I mean, but the other thing is, I feel like, and I guess we'll never know the truth, but I assume that it's true that Louis called Margaret's son, who
I
we
do too.
never really knew existed before, um, and at work, and said things to him that caused her to. And I understand that she was half the season in a total rage, that he was still allowed to
Hmm.
uh film, and she kind of couldn't let go of that, and that
Mm.
affected her per- self-portrayal this season, how she projected herself. um and that gets into some legal things too, right? Like, I don't think they want to. If I were on one of these shows, which, by the way, I would last 1 minute. I can't take it when people are mean to me. But if my employers were allowing one of my fellow employees to abuse me or my children or whatever, I'd be like, hey, can you intervene on this? And if the answer was no, I'd be really mad and upset. And that is obviously was something that was going on with her. Um, we'll never know whether that really did happen. I would believe Margaret over Louis any day.
Hmm.
And especially with what he said in the finale, that was so chilling.
Exactly.
And that Teresa didn't even have a problem with in the Rails reunion, which was very, very disturbing and upsetting. Again, skipping ahead, but yeah, I mean, these are all fourth wall things that I know they don't want to deal with. And I understand why.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and it's also just like if that's been in the back of Margaret's head during filming of like a genuine frustration and anger over the fact that Louis is allowed to film still, despite
Yeah.
crossing all these different lines behind the scenes, allegedly, she wouldn't she wouldn't feel that strongly if she was making that up, in my opinion. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
there something
Absolutely.
happened, right? So it's like and I think that because that has happened with because all the Bo Dietl stuff, because
Oh
of
my
I mean,
God.
it just feels like you know, my interpretation of it is that Margaret and some of the other women feel genuinely kind of threatened in his presence. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
um, it's dark. It's just dark.
Dark. It is dark. And he is dark. And I don't know. I mean, I worry for Teresa.
Yeah,
Not that I guess yeah, I met her once, but I think she's in for it with this guy. And it's very worrisome. And there's definitely something, um, I think her standards have changed in that,
I
or
agree.
not changed necessarily, but like that she saw him say that stuff during the finale and didn't blink an eye. And that Dolores had to be like, snap out of it, like this is really, he's going to get a ton of shit for that. And so are you. And it was like only that caused her to come around to, yeah,
Yeah.
he's a,
Do you I forget who said it. Do you believe the idea that like there's just all this stuff that Louis just like hasn't told Teresa, you know, that he doesn't really he keeps her in the loop just enough in terms of what he's really doing?
I don't know. But I, I'm curious about that.
Yeah.
But like, and I'm still confused about what his job is. And
Or what happened to that scene that was in the trailer that we never got to
yes,
see. Yeah.
right.
So,
Contextually, having now seen the whole season, I feel like that was maybe a bit of a cheat, I could see her saying to him, I don't want to talk about this, like in a way that is more innocent than how it seemed in that
for
scene.
sure.
Um, but yeah, yeah, we don't, I'm worried about her.
Yeah.
She lost everything. She went to prison, and, you know, has made like recovered from bankruptcy. And I think it's worrisome, so we'll
Yeah.
see what happens.
Yeah.
Obviously, she's going to remain famous forever. But I hope that it isn't all the things that I think we're thinking about
Hmm.
him.
Hmm. Shifting gears a little bit to something that we haven't touched on yet that happened within the season a couple times was, I mean, it was the emergence of a feud between Jennifer Aiden and Danielle Cabral.
Yes.
You know, to me, taking obviously the fact that things got physical not once but twice between them,
Yeah.
they're a
Hmm.
pretty good match in terms of a Housewives feud and like the energy they bring for each other. I do think that obviously, especially the second time Danielle getting physical and lunging across the table,
Yeah. Yeah.
felt a little bit too much. And you know, the first time she was in her face and it was a plastic cup, it's different. The second time involved a
Yeah.
glass pitcher allegedly that was cut out. But what did you make of this feud between two women who mean, Jennifer for a longer time than Danielle, but two women who have shown over the years that like they'll go there. They'll maybe cross that line sometimes.
That came out of nowhere. They were friends last year, and I thought they were pretty well matched as far as adversaries went. And I was interested at how dismantled Danielle was by um Jen making fun of
Like body shaming her husband. Yeah.
yeah, and I've seen that he's been posting a lot of shirtless selfies
Yep, I've
on
seen that.
Instagram. Good for him.
There was a full reel after the episode aired.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, he should do
Good
what
for
he
him.
needs to do.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. And I do think that ultimately Jen Aiden is a sad person, and I'm curious about what will happen to her without this show. But I enjoyed their their fighting. I mean, I don't want anything to turn physical, although obviously in real life that does happen.
Yeah,
And there
that's
aren't
true.
investigations made by a corporate entity. People aren't
Yeah.
suspended. Um, but yeah, Jen Aiden I don't like her, but she is a good housewife. I've always like she's very up and down, and I think Danielle is also a good housewife.
Yeah.
So I will miss them on my TV.
Yeah, yeah. To me, it's sort of like Jen is one of those people who you either love her or you hate her, but you have to admit that she is pretty good television.
Yeah.
But she's also one of those housewives who has maybe just kind of lost the plot and gotten too can't kind of see above the fray anymore. And she's somebody that like in another situation, if the show is in a different place, she would benefit from a season or two off kind of thing. You know what I mean?
She had crossed the Rubicon for me to be like pretty dislikable. And then in the finale, when she was basically saying in front of Teresa, oh, she doesn't understand this yet. She doesn't understand what just happened. Jackie, that was crazy. Oh, Marge, you really got her. Like I was like, I'm back. I'm back with
Right.
Jenny.
She
That was
she
very
she
funny.
had a good episode that episode because
She did.
she showed that she is savvy. She showed that she's really quick to read what's going on. And her and Margaret had a couple moments at that table where they were sort of like, do you see this? Like, you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
And with Melissa too, like Melissa was like, I just want to make sure that we're sane people who saw what just happened. And Jen's like, yeah, yeah, we did. We saw. So yeah, it
Yeah, I
was
even
very,
yeah,
she couldn't
yeah.
help it, even though Teresa is her bread and butter. She was impressed by what Marge did and also has always hated Jackie too.
Yes, yes.
And I think I don't think Jackie would say that she's a close personal friend of Jen Aiden's. I think it's all about Teresa. But yeah, she got me back with that one.
So let's go to that final meal again because it all leads up to what I think was, I mean, actually, I think that, Margaret making that 11th hour reveal about Jackie, she's saying you subpoenaed the wrong bitch. That to me was a masterful Housewives move. It showed that Margaret was always kind of two steps ahead, even if she'd been blindsided by Jackie. I think over the years, she's done a good job clearly in the background of getting information on people and saving it for a rainy day. And whether you think that that's going too far or too conniving or whatever, ultimately, like this is what Jersey Housewives had become, and Margaret became good at it, And I was impressed by that moment. I really was. It was fantastic television. It was, yeah,
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, that was yeah, you subpoenaed the wrong bitch. After the funeral wreath being delivered the episode before, I mean, I can't imagine knowing that there's been a gathering at someone's house purely to show receipts about things, like I can't,
Involving the
she
lawyer
handled,
too.
she handled that in such a good
Yes.
way. And it was so funny, I thought, and I still don't know what the receipts were. But I didn't doubt it for a second that Margaret had met with,
Me
I
neither.
assume, I assume it's true, all of those things, but like,
But they had met
I,
with
I also
Laura,
don't,
you know?
I also don't think, by the way, that either of them leaked that video onto the internet. And it's the same way that I feel like Teresa has always blamed Caroline Manzo for her legal problems, when in fact, those kinds of investigations are years in the making, and that's actually impossible. I just think it's easy for her to think those things when in fact, I assume it's the ex girlfriend who leaked that somehow.
Right.
Um,
Yeah,
but
yeah, and I think that speaks to sort of like it's kind of savvy on Teresa's from Teresa's point of view, because it's sort of like obviously there are way more people involved in whatever that is that could have leaked it, but she knows that like if she puts a name out from the show, that's going to stick, and it sort of
yeah,
creates this conspiracy that only deals with these 8 women. You know what I mean? And like when it's there's many more people involved.
right. And when Jackie turned to Teresa and was like, I really hated you at the time, or whatever it was that she said.
It was
um,
me.
yeah. I was like, yelling. I mean, that was so, I hesitate to use the phrase mic drop moment, but it really was. And and also understandable. And by the way, I wouldn't have thought that Jackie had that in her. So, like, good for her.
Yeah.
She should meet with whoever she wants to. And Melissa's commentary as it was going on, where she was just like, everywhere I was going, people were coming up to me to try to talk to me about Louis. Like, that was like a good context to have. And when they did the watching of that scene, and Melissa said the thing about Louis's niece coming up to her in Miami or someplace, and Teresa's like mumbling, I guess I'm going to tell Louis that his cousin is really, it's just like,
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
like,
That was telling though.
how
Yeah.
much can she stick her head in the sand? Like, I mean, as we've seen quite a bit, her erstwhile husband called her a cunt on television, and she didn't admit it for years. So, she is who she is, Teresa. And
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's just such, it's very frustrating. I'm believing for the other side of this group, but also just as a viewer sometimes where it's sort of like, if there are all these people from Louis' past, all his exes, family members, people like pretty much everybody does not have a nice thing to say about him who doesn't know him right now. And even people who know him right now don't have nice things to say about him. It's a very small group that will defend him.
yeah,
And it's just sort of like, how can you not believe that where there's smoke, there's fire? And also, if you're one of the other women and these people are reaching out to you every single week, it's all these different people and all these different mediums. Are you expected to never give in to that and kind of feed the curiosity of what these people have to say? Like of course they're gonna hear these people out.
yeah. And she and Jen Aiden had met with Margaret's ex best friend,
Exactly.
Laura, or whatever her name is. So, like, this is very selective. This is very selective.
Which is classic. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and that's fine. That's fine. They can do these things and then hold it against each other, and then do the exact same thing and then have it held against them, and it doesn't matter. This is what it
Right.
is. But this does all speak to the fact that this particular show has become untenable and naughty, and maybe just not worth it for Bravo, especially because the ratings, and this was interesting. I think New Jersey has always been in the top 3 or 4 rated
Hmm.
of the Housewives. And this season, the ratings were terrible. I don't know what the cumulative ratings were, but the live ratings were really, really bad. And
Like
I don't
especially bad.
know. Yeah, and I don't know whether that's because they were like promoting it less, or switched it to a different time slot. It's, these are all factors that, and
Hmm.
maybe people were watching it on Peacock and not live, but and maybe it was because they kind of showed their cards early that they were just giving up on the show. So it's not worth investing in it, literally.
Yeah, I do think the reveal that there was not going to be a reunion, it happened like 4 or 5 episodes into the season, really
Yes,
early,
very
and I think that
early.
kind of did take some of the air out of what we were watching a little bit. I'm curious what you think about this, but I think from my reaction from the finale and also the watch party episodes, a through line for that for me is sort of like the really the emergence of Dolores as a really meaningful center to this group and really
Yes.
like a figurehead of Jersey in a way that has been true for a while, but I think it really just became something you can't deny in the past couple weeks. It's just sort of like, I mean, even just that image of her sitting at that table in that black jumpsuit with the hair, and it's just,
Gorgeous.
how,
Gorgeous.
and
I
how can
wanted a
you
painting of it.
literally? It's iconic, and but you can, it just felt even her going between the rooms. It's sort of like if they move forward with anybody in this group, to me,
Yes.
Dolores is the person who really is that person. I don't know.
Yeah.
There was just something about her showing at the end of the season that really felt like that.
Build it around Dolores. Um, I love Jen Fessler too, although she has not shown the stomach. The fact that she
Really
bailed
interesting.
so early in that dinner, that she and Dolores had arranged. That was so funny. Like, maybe there were extenuating circumstances that we just never found out, but she's great. I love her. There are a couple of them that I would keep too, but and I'm also like, I feel like my expectations for Dolores on the Traders are through the roof. So
Through
like,
the roof. Yes, good call out because I'm so excited to see her on that show. Oh my God.
she's
She's
just
made for
like,
that.
yeah, I mean, the Switzerland thing has become like a joke and kind of a cliche about her, but like she's really her skills are unbelievable. And by the way, like they weren't always like, I mean, we're talking about the early clash with Jackie. Like it wasn't always the way with her. Like
Mm-mm.
this is like she has found this lane for herself and is very effective as a cast member.
Very much so. Very much so. And yeah, the Jen Fessler stuff really kind of surprised me because I was so beginning of this season, I was like, oh my God, Fessler is so on the track from of friend to full time. Like there's no doubt in my mind. They all love her. But for her to bow out of that lunch and then also in the watch party, she revealed that she has not spoken to Teresa or Jen since finding out about some of those leaked screenshots with bloggers. It's sort of like she never confronted them about it. That frustrates me as somebody who has really liked her earlier in her time on the show.
Yeah, you can't be conflict avoidant if
No.
you're on the Real Housewives. And by the way, I wish they'd said to her, "What do you mean? What screenshots?" That group could have talked about it
Yes.
more
So true.
than the other group. But I also wondered whether Dolores was relegated to the Teresa room. Obviously, they're very old, close friends, but the numbers are really against that group. And it did
Hmm.
look a little sad when Dolores went to the other room, which is full. There just aren't that many people on Team Teresa anymore. Like she's alienated most of the cast at this point.
Right. Yeah. And that gets into an idea, Kate, that like, I mean, you and I both kind of pay attention to the conversation online around these shows. And obviously, when you're in this online space, especially around this show, it really feels like there are way more Teresa fans than fans of anybody else. But if you kind of step out of that bubble, even in Watch What Happens Live polls, even when you're posting on Threads and not Twitter, it's sort of like it's a way more balanced in terms of the
Right.
representation of who people are
Yeah.
fans of. And so it really feels like you realize that the online space on Twitter, especially, which really drives conversation around this show, is it's dominated by this kind of small but really loud contingent of diehard Teresa fans who I understand why she has cultivated so much loyalty over the years because of how much she's shown and how much she's kind of battled through things. It makes sense to me. Um, but that skews perception of where the viewership is kind of leaning towards or what they're thinking about.
Yeah.
What's your kind of perception of that?
Other than fearing the tree huggers.
Yeah, I mean, same. I'm like, I'm too far gone in that regard, but
Do
you
they
know,
attack you though?
all the time. Yeah, I mean, I get 1-star reviews on my podcast all the time. I get told that like I'm on Margaret's payroll. I get told it's just you
Wow.
can't criticize anything that that side does without
Yeah.
getting that. So
Um, well, luckily I don't have a podcast. So I feel like the fandom, as we know, of the Real Housewives of New Jersey is very toxic. The Team Melissa people aren't much better.
yeah, you're right.
Although they have, it's just a toxic fandom.
Yeah,
It's like you waded into the DC versus Marvel world, except
yeah,
for very different types
yeah.
of people. Um, I don't really know why. But and I again, I have nothing but respect for Teresa Giudice as a
Of course,
TV
same.
star
Um,
and Real Housewife, but you can't say anything. I mean, it's yeah, and she's been the through line, so like during the really bad seasons of Real
mhm.
Housewives of Jersey, which there were some low lows there. um she was the only thing worth watching that season with the twins.
Oh my God.
uh,
Yeah,
the,
you're right. You're very
the
right.
things we've gone through, Gibson.
And Teresa was there by our side the whole time. That's
He was
not you can't deny that. Yeah.
lifting us up. But yeah, I mean, I'm be curious to see in the conversations that are surely happening at Bravo and NBCU right now, like what they're weighing in terms of if they're bringing because she's obviously without question a Mount Rushmore housewife, but she has this divisive fandom. She was in on this thing with Jen Aiden to share and spread rumors about and make things up about their fellow castmates. And even if she
Louis.
herself, if yeah, and then Louis. And so it's just like, what do they do with that? Do they give her her own show? Is that an interesting show? Is that rewarding Louis? And
Hmm.
he is on this on the spinoff thing, right? The young,
Yeah, yeah, Gia's on Making It Manhattan and
yeah,
Teresa's on
right,
House of Villains on E this
right,
fall.
right,
So
right.
there's other you're reminded that there are other venues to kind of see this to see any of these people. Um, but you're right, it's sort of it's such a catch 22 because let's say you keep Teresa on Jersey, let's just say that, but kind of most of the other people are gone.
Mhm.
Isn't it only just a matter of time before somebody on this like you know, new cast goes against her and it just becomes the same situation where it's just
Exactly.
not instead of
Yeah.
Melissa, it's somebody else, and it's that's where I think that they have it's an impossible decision and challenge that they have at
I think
their
they have to
yeah.
start from scratch or build it around Dolores and a couple of other people.
Yeah.
So we'll see about that.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
this is making me realize I have to check in with Bravo about what's going on.
Well, I was going to ask because you reported around the watch party and the reunion and some of those updates
Yeah.
when you were reporting any of that stuff, like you didn't get any impression in terms of like where things were leaning or just or just what they were feeling about the season at all.
I've been told just what everyone else has, what Andy Cohen is. I mean, I think this is all just true that they're just gonna, after the season ended, that they were just gonna really take a look. The thing is, I don't know that they're in a rush, right? Like, it's
Yeah.
like there's so many different cities and franchises right now. And And I know just from an interview that I did with Frances Berwick at BravoCon that there is a concern about there being too many Real Housewives seasons and kind of the idea of and I asked her that at literally at BravoCon when there were four on or maybe about to be
Yeah, there were a
in the
lot
next,
around that time. Yeah.
yeah, and which was a big scheduling mishap that shouldn't have happened, but I guess was probably because of BravoCon, right?
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I don't think they're in a huge rush, but maybe all these things are happening very actively, and I've just been not told about it. But yeah, I mean, we'll see. I don't with the reboot that Roni did, which I thought was a success. I know there are people who think otherwise, or liked the beginning of the season and then fell off or whatever. But like New York City is very different from New Jersey, right? And I don't know whether you could do the same thing starting from scratch, the way the
I
way
agree.
Real Housewives of New York did. Like if you're focusing on one area of New Jersey, like you know, northern and central New Jersey, I'm not sure how many women there are who haven't already been in the background of the show, already.
Or
So,
vetted and passed on already, basically. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or in some posh fashion show that were during the dark times.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good point. And like, yeah, I think the Roni reboot was successful, but I don't think that's the answer here necessarily. Because I also think it's like, and who knows if they'll bring them back, but like to me, taken out of the context of everything, Rachel Fuda and Danielle Cabral are both in their second seasons of Housewives, and they're both pretty solid housewives. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
think especially Danielle, but they both have a lot going on and a lot to contribute, I think. And I think they got bogged down by various things that were already existing in this franchise. But like, I have a hard time believing that Bravo's just going to say goodbye to them after two seasons, or at least both of them. I don't know. I don't know. We can speculate for days, Kate.
No, we could and might, but yeah, no, I mean, I'm less. I Rachel Fuda seems like a nice person to
Yeah.
me. I
She's not
her
indispensable.
They really impressed me at the reunion last year. I didn't see that as much from her and John this year. As you said, they kind of bailed early
Yeah,
on
you're
what
right.
meant to be a season long arc, perhaps, but by walking out of that
Meeting.
dinner.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she's also pregnant. I don't know. I don't wish this upon anyone. So
Yeah. Yeah.
so I'm happy for her, but they have, I don't know, they have little kids. Like,
Yeah.
go.
Yeah. 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 Well, Kate, is there any lingering thoughts, any lingering ideas around Jersey? I mean, again, it's sort of like if it's this weird feeling of like we had this whole season, which was again, we both said we kind of enjoyed the season. The
Yeah,
finale was amazing, but like why rehash every single thing if we're just gonna kind of wipe the slate clean, it's
right,
this weird
right.
feeling.
Yeah, no, and last season I thought was terrible and then was saved by an incredible
Amazing
reunion
reunion. Yeah.
reunion episodes. Like holy, like
Amazing.
fantastic.
Yeah.
And then this year was the opposite. I thought this year was very watchable. And then didn't have a reunion at all, obviously, but had a great finale. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I would be sad if I never saw Teresa on my TV again. But there are other places for her to go. And I feel like Dolores is the future, but again, who knows? I
Yeah.
I don't I don't. But I'm
Yeah.
very curious. We'll
Yeah.
see.
Yeah. And last thing I'll say is just that like I do think that this past 6 or 7 seasons, almost 6 years, has been an incredible run of Housewives before it really got too dark.
Yeah.
When I think when Margaret joined up through Jackie and Jennifer
Yes.
joining, Rachel and Danielle joining, it's been a pretty the cast has not changed very much and
Yeah.
they've really kept the drama up and obviously it went too far, but I think that they should in some ways it's a commendable kind of this run of Housewives.
Totally.
It's a feat of casting.
Yeah. And yeah, Margaret is great, is a great housewife too. I'd be sad if I didn't see her on TV again also. She had kind of a quieter, sad year just because, her ex-husband had died, who she was very
Hmm.
close to, and and it was interesting that we saw that stuff with Joe Benigno and then never I assume he was diagnosed at some point and
Right.
she
We never,
didn't
yeah,
have
you're right.
screen. Like he got a he was about to get a biopsy and then presumably got a biopsy and found out he had prostate cancer and we never saw that. So I don't know why, but like that was probably happening right
Yep, for sure.
when they're having an entire meeting about her. So but yeah, and he really won my heart when he was telling John Fuda, you know, you have to go to the hospital. You have to go to the hospital. That was so crazy that John Fuda almost didn't, like he
Crazy.
just didn't want to on screen admit some kind of weakness when he's having an anaphylactic
He can't
reaction or
speak.
whatever.
Right.
Yeah. Like, it's just like, come on, man. Don't die. But yeah, I mean, I I don't know. There are so many strong members of this cast, and as you say, it's been a they've just added to the cast instead of really subtracting. And yeah, it's a pretty good group, but this season didn't work for
Untenable.
Bravo for various reasons. So
Yeah.
that's what we're going with.
Yeah. Well, Kate, this has been so fun to talk your ear off about all of this stuff. So appreciate you being here. Where can people find your writing and get more of your work? Because it's really valuable to me as somebody who's in this space. I really appreciate all your
Well,
work.
thank you. I'm an editor and a reporter at Variety, and that's where you'll find me. And as much as I try not to be on Twitter anymore, sometimes I have outbursts where, but yeah, I'm on the internet. So and yeah, I cover all of television and with a passion for Bravo. So
Love it. Yeah. Well, Kate, thank you so much for being here, and hopefully we'll do this again soon.
anytime.
I want to gab.